Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What unfolds when a titan of comedy, a living legend, steps into the bright lights of a morning show, only to be ambushed by a host with a clear and calculated agenda? The air crackled with tension the second Eddie Murphy graced the View's stage. But no one, absolutely no one, could foresee the sheer force of the collision course set between him and Joy Behar. This was more than a celebrity interview gone sideways. It was a chilling lesson in how fast a conversation can detonate when professional respect is thrown out the window before we dissect this stunning confrontation. Lock in your subscription and ignite the comments below, because this is a spectacle you'll need to unpack with everyone. He entered the studio radiating that signature smile, extending a hand to the panel with the polished grace of a man who has navigated the entertainment world for over 4 decades. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the other co-hosts greeted him with what felt like pure adoration, their excitement palpable at having an icon of his stature on their set. "We've been anticipating this all week," Whoopi beamed. But beneath the surface, a different kind of anticipation was brewing, one that Eddie, with his easy million-dollar confidence, was about to face head-on. The interview began as a portrait of professional harmony. Eddie, with his trademark humor and passion, captivated the hosts, and the live audience with tailies from behind the curtain. His unmatched charisma filled the studio as he wove stories about his cast and crew, each anecdote a perfect blend of comedic genius and a deep-seated respect for the art of film. After all these years, Eddie mused, his eyes gleaming under the studio lights. "I still feel that spark. There's a certain magic in creating something that makes people feel, that gives them an escape." Sarah Haynes leaned in, her agreement sincere. "That integrity shines through in your work. You've connected with so many generations because true comedy," Eddie countered thoughtfully, "speaks a universal language. People need to laugh. If I can offer that release, that moment of joy, I've done my part." But then the atmosphere shifted. Joy Behar, who had been a silent predator coiled in her chair, suddenly lunged forward, her expression a mask of manufactured concern that barely hid her true intent. "Speaking of comedy, Eddie," she interjected, her voice slicing through the warmth, "don't you believe some of your past work is deeply problematic by the standards we hold today?" The change was electric, a sudden cold front sweeping through the studio. Eddie's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened, a subtle crack in his composed exterior as he absorbed the unexpected verbal assault. The other hosts shot panicked looks at each other. Joy was taking the show off the rails. "I'm not sure I follow," Eddie replied, his voice steady, a master of control even as the ground shifted beneath him. But Joy pressed her advantage, her eyes glinting with the thrill of the confrontation she'd engineered. "Your old stand-up jokes that are now considered offensive. Don't you feel an apology is owed to your audience?" Joy, Whoopi attempted, a gentle but firm plea to pull back from the brink. "Perhaps we can focus on Eddie's new film." But it was like throwing gasoline on a fire. "No, this is a vital conversation," Joy declared, her voice ringing with self-righteousness. "In this era of accountability, shouldn't public figures answer for their past?" Eddie's posture straightened. The easygoing guest replaced by a man defending his legacy. "Mistakes. Let me be perfectly clear, Joy. I've been in comedy for over 40 years. My job is to push boundaries. But at whose expense?" Joy fired back, her volume rising. "Those boundaries you pushed left a mark on people." "Comedy is a mirror to society," Eddie retorted, his tone still level but now edged with steel. "If we start erasing art based on the shifting sands of social opinion, where does it stop?" Joy leaned back, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips, believing she had him cornered. "So, you're saying you have zero regrets about any of it?" "I'm saying I stand by my body of work," Eddie stated, his voice resonating with unwavering conviction. "I've evolved, as we all do. But I will not apologize for being a chapter in the history of comedy." The studio air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnesses to a public trial, while the other hosts looked on utterly powerless. "That's a very convenient way to sidestep responsibility," Joyce sneered, the contempt in her voice undisguised. Eddie's jaw locked. "Convenient? You think it's convenient to be ambushed on national television? To have my entire life's work twisted into a pre-written narrative you cooked up before I even sat down? I'm asking the tough questions." Joy shot back, a weak defense from someone who was clearly enjoying the spectacle. "No," Eddie corrected, his voice now commanding the room, the power dynamic shifting in real time. "You're leveling accusations. Do you hold every comedian to this retroactive standard? Or is it just the one sitting in this chair today? The other hosts were frozen, their attempts to intervene now futile. But Eddie wasn't done. He turned, his gaze locking directly onto Joy. Let me ask you something, Joy. In your long career, have you ever said a single thing someone somewhere might find offensive? Tell me, have you ever told a joke that didn't quite land a few years later? Because if we're opening these books for a public audit, then every single page gets examined. Wouldn't you agree? Joy's face burned a deep crimson at Eddie's razor-sharp challenge. She had clearly never anticipated him turning her own weapon against her with such brutal efficiency. The smug mask of superiority she wore moments ago shattered, replaced by the raw fury of a cornered animal. That is entirely different, Joyce sputtered. The flustered panic was evident as her own rigid standards were forced upon her. My work has never been the kind of material you've produced. Is that a fact? Eddie shot back, one eyebrow arching with a theatrical skepticism that told everyone he wasn't buying her paper-thin defense for a single second. So, you're saying you've never, not once, cracked a joke about someone's looks, where they come from, or what they believe. You've never uttered a single word that could have possibly bruised an ego or made someone feel out of place. Whoopi lunged back into the fray, sensing the conversation was now a runaway train about to fly off the rails. Perhaps we should all just take a breath and remember we're supposed to be on the same side here. But Eddie was just igniting his engines. Joy's hypocritical crusade, demanding a standard from him she refused for herself, had clearly detonated something deep inside. No, Whoopi. This is precisely the reckoning we need to have. Because this spectacle is the perfect exhibition of the poisonous double standard that is strangling any chance for real conversation in this country. Double standards. Joyce scoffed, her voice practically curdling with indignation. I think you're being a touch theatrical, Eddie. Theatrical? Eddie let out a bark of laughter, but it was a sound completely devoid of warmth. Joy, you set a televised ambush for me, demanding I prostrate myself for my entire life's work, and you have the nerve to call me dramatic for pointing out your hypocrisy. The studio audience had fallen deathly still. They were utterly captivated, watching a confrontation so raw it felt like it should be behind closed doors. This was no longer the managed chaos of daytime TV. This was a bare-knuckle brawl between two titanic egos with irreconcilable views of the world. I was not ambushing you, Joy insisted, but the defensiveness in her voice was a confession that she knew precisely what she'd done. I was posing legitimate questions about the intersection of accountability and entertainment. Legitimate. Eddie's voice climbed, the steel and his famous composure finally starting to groan under the strain of Joy's relentless siege. You walked onto this set with a pre-written script designed to paint me as a villain. And now you're trying to twist reality to gaslight me into believing this is some noble quest for journalistic truth. Sarah Haynes made a valiant final effort to steer the ship away from the iceberg. I believe the core issue we're all trying to explore is how an artist can mature and change while still respecting their body of work. Thank you, Sarah, Eddie conceded, his tone softening for a brief moment toward the sole host who seemed to want an actual dialogue. That is the very definition of authentic growth. It isn't about torching your own history or pretending it's a blank page. It's about absorbing the lessons of your journey and continuing to build from a place of truth. But Joy was a bulldog who refused to release her grip. Authenticity is no shield against causing damage, Eddie. Words carry weight, and people in the public eye must answer for the pain they've inflicted. And there it is, Eddie. His voice a cocktail of pure frustration and profound disappointment. The baseline assumption that the very purpose of comedy is to inflict injury. Do you even have a fundamental grasp of what comedy is, Joy? Of its vital function within a society? I understand that comedy can be a weapon to isolate people and perpetuate damaging stereotypes, Joy retorted, her confidence surging as she retreated to the fortified ground of her social justice script. It can also be a scalpel to dissect the powerful, a bullhorn to speak truth to institutions, and a lifeline that helps people find laughter in the darkest of times, Eddie countered. But I suppose that version doesn't quite fit the neat little box you've built for me, does it? The other hosts exchanged frantic, desperate glances, searching for an escape hatch from the spiraling vortex of hostility. Whoopi, who had been a silent observer to the escalating warfare, finally deployed her final option, a direct command. All right, listen. Both of you, she stated, her voice resonating with the firm, moderating authority that had become her trademark. "We are all professionals here. We should be able to disagree without trying to dismantle one another." "Whoopi is right." Sarah quickly chimed in. "There has to be space for multiple viewpoints on this." But Joy was constitutionally incapable of not having the final say, unable to stop herself from delivering one last patronizing jab. "I simply believe that when your platform is as vast as yours, you bear a profound responsibility to wield it with care." That single comment was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Eddie had officially hit his limit with Joy's self-righteous sermonizing. A responsibility to whom, Joy? To you? To some faceless committee that dictates what's permissible this week? Or to the millions of people who have championed my work for 4 decades? To society? Joy declared pompously, seemingly deaf to the sheer arrogance of her own words. Society? Eddie's voice was now thick with incredulous rage. "You believe you are the voice of society. You think your narrow personal checklist of what is and isn't proper somehow speaks for hundreds of millions of individuals." "I believe I speak for anyone who values basic human decency," Joy proclaimed, doubling down on her crumbling moral high ground. "Basic human decency," Eddie echoed, his volume swelling with every syllable. "Is it basic human decency to set a trap for a guest on national television? Is it basic human decency to caricature a person's entire life's work, stripped of all context and nuance? Is it basic human decency to demand a modern apology for art forged in a completely different cultural universe decades ago?" Joy's face was now a furious shade of scarlet, her voice trembling with rage as the full scale of her miscalculation crashed down upon her. "I am not going to sit here and be browbeaten by someone who built a fortune on offensive trash. And I am not going to sit here and be savaged by someone who lured me onto this program under a completely false flag." Eddie shot back without missing a beat. "Did you honestly believe I would just sit here meekly while you attempted to demolish my legacy? Did you think I would just smile and play along while you tried to shrink my entire career down to fit your personal list of grievances?" The air in the studio was electric, stretched to its absolute breaking point as the other hosts stared witty-eyed and panicked at the smoldering ruins of the interview. The crowd sat as if turned to stone, a silent sea of faces witnessing a volcanic eruption of conflict, the likes of which had never been seen in the meticulously manicured world of daytime talk. "This is precisely the kind of hostility I was referring to," Joy declared, scrambling to reclaim the moral high ground as it crumbled beneath her. "Hostility?" Eddie's laugh was a shard of glass. "Joy, you've dedicated the last 10 minutes to a relentless assault on me, my legacy, and my very character, and you dare call me hostile for mounting a defense. The audacity is staggering." Whoopi, seeing the interview completely derail, made a final desperate plea for order. "All right, I believe we all need to take a collective breath and recall that we are here to discuss significant issues." But Eddie was far past the point of diplomatic resolutions. This was no longer a debate, but a character assassination masquerading as social commentary. The gloves were not just off. They were thrown to the floor, and Joy Behar was about to learn in front of a national audience that she had chosen the wrong titan to try and publicly humiliate. Eddie rose from his chair, his every motion measured and deliberate. Yet his eyes burned with a fire that sent a chill through the entire studio. The atmosphere instantly shifted from a strained tension to a palpable sense of alarm as one of Hollywood's most revered icons finally reached his breaking point. "You know something, Joy?" Eddie's voice dropped to a dangerously low register, a quiet rumble that felt infinitely more menacing than all the shouting that had preceded it. "I have navigated this industry for over 40 years, and in that time, I faced down critics, detractors, and those who wish to see me fall. But never, and I mean never, have I encountered someone with the sheer unmitigated gall to invite me onto their stage only to spring this kind of self-righteous trap." Joy squirmed in her seat, the first flicker of genuine panic dawning on her face as she realized she had pushed a legend too far. "Eddie, I believe you're overreacting to some simple questions." Simple questions? Eddie's voice detonated across the set, making several crew members physically flinch. "Simple questions. You call a systematic dismantling of my life's work. Simple questions. You call demanding an apology for bringing laughter to millions. Simple questions. Lady, you wouldn't recognize a simple question if it came with a name tag and shook your hand." Behind the cameras, Producers were now a flurry of frantic hand signals, desperately trying to signal a cut to a commercial break. But the confrontation was moving with the speed and intensity of a runaway train too powerful for anyone to stop. I was attempting to have a meaningful dialogue about accountability, Joy said, her voice a mere whisper, her earlier bravado utterly shattered by Eddie's righteous fury. Meaningful dialogue. Eddie scoffed, the sound harsh and bitter, stripped of all his trademark warmth. Joy, you wouldn't know a meaningful dialogue if it was projected onto a screen with step-by-step instructions. What you were trying to do was score cheap, hollow points by ambushing a guest you assumed would just roll over and absorb the blows. Whoopi was now on her feet as well. Her expression showing she understood this had escalated beyond the realm of a typical talk show spat. Eddie, perhaps we should all just try to calm down for a moment. No, Whoopi. Eddie shot back, turning to her, but keeping his focus locked, his energy a furious, controlled burn. I am done calming down. I am tired of being told to calm down. I am tired of pretending that this kind of ambush journalism is acceptable. I am tired of watching people like Joy hijack every conversation to lecture, to shame, and to signal their own virtue instead of engaging with a single real idea. He pivoted back to Joy, who now looked genuinely terrified by the sheer force of his conviction. You want to talk about causing harm, Joy? Let's discuss the harm you've just inflicted with this little theatrical performance of yours. You have taken what should have been a celebration of creativity and art and twisted it into a venomous interrogation. You have shown millions of people that honest conversation is impossible when one party enters with a premeditated agenda to annihilate the other. I never intended to annihilate you, Joy protested, her words hollow and devoid of any belief. Really? Eddie's voice was drenched in acid sarcasm. Then enlighten me. What would you call this spectacle? What do you call spending 15 minutes assassinating my character, my body of work, and my integrity? What do you call demanding I repent for comedy that brought joy to the world? If that isn't an attempted takedown, then I would be fascinated to hear your definition of a friendly chat. Sarah Haynes made one final valiant attempt to pull something from the smoldering wreckage of the interview. I think there may have been a breakdown in communication here. There was no breakdown, Sarah, Eddie corrected, his tone softening for a moment to acknowledge her before snapping back to razor sharp as his gaze fell on Joy. This was a deliberate, calculated strike. Joy knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote those questions. She knew precisely the kind of fire she was trying to start. Her only miscalculation was in believing that I would just sit here and let myself be burned. Joy made one last catastrophic attempt to seize back the narrative she had so spectacularly lost. I think you're being paranoid, Eddie. Not everything is a plot against you. That single comment was the spark that ignited the gunpowder. Eddie's eyes widened. A wave of incandescent fury washing over him that seemed to shock even himself. Paranoid, he roared, his voice now a physical force that consumed the entire studio. Paranoid, Joy, you have just spent 20 minutes trying to systematically tear down everything I have built over a lifetime. And you have the nerve to call me paranoid for noticing. Did you really think gaslighting me on national television was going to work? That I would doubt my own reality just because you commanded it? The studio audience was now dead silent. Every single person transfixed by the raw, unfiltered emotion pouring from an icon they had loved for decades. This wasn't a celebrity tantrum. This was a master of his craft, a cultural giant, defending his entire legacy against a cynical attack from someone who had fatally underestimated both his intellect and his spine. This right here is the entire problem with people like you, Joy, Eddie continued. His voice now imbued with the gravitas of decades spent battling an industry that had tried to break him time and time again. You believe you can say anything, attack anyone, and then when they dare to respond with the anger you've earned, you simply write them off as overreacting or paranoid or dramatic. Well, I have some news for you. That tired old playbook has no power over me. Joy sat frozen in a state of stunned paralysis, utterly defeated, with no answer for the verbal tempest she had unleashed. Do you know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Eddie asked, his voice finally lowering, but the intensity burning just as brightly. A legend was seated before you, a man who had dedicated 4 decades to the art of comedy, to the science of entertainment, to the soul of connecting with an audience. You had the chance to probe the mind of a master, to discuss the alchemy of humor, But instead you chose to ignite a political witch hunt, revealing it as the only weapon in your arsenal. He paused, letting the indictment hang in the electrified air, his eyes locked onto the camera, speaking directly to the millions watching as he delivered the final crushing blow. And that, he stated, his voice cutting through the tension, more than any joke I've ever told, is what is truly offensive. An absolute deafening silence descended upon the studio, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. After what felt like an eternity, Whoopi cleared her throat, a small sound in the vast quiet, attempting to salvage the wreckage. Well, this has certainly been an intense conversation, she offered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the profound shock of the moment. Eddie scanned the set one last time, the inferno of his anger receding, yet the embers of his disappointment glowed brightly. It didn't have to be, Whoopi. It really didn't have to be. And with that parting shot, he turned and walked off that stage, leaving in his wake a stunned audience, a panel of shell-shocked hosts, and one thoroughly dismantled Joy Behar, who had just learned a catastrophic lesson about trying to trap a lion. If you were captivated by this raw display of a legend refusing to be broken, and instead flipping the script on his attacker, ensure you subscribe and join the conversation in the comments below. What do you believe was Joy Behar's true motive behind launching this calculated attack on the legacy of Eddie Murphy?